I'm your host, Danny Wright. I'm the current COO of 1863 Ventures, where our mission is to create $100 billion of new wealth by and for the new majority by 2030. And we do that through a variety of different accelerator programs to help businesses scale and grow. So I'm going to go ahead and let the panelists introduce themselves. We'll start with Miss Terry.
Hi, I am Terry Nichelle Bradley. I am the founder and CEO of Brown Toy Box. We are an educational toy company working to normalize Black excellence, create pathways to prosperous careers, and expand Black children's ideas of the possibilities for their lives through STEAM education, purposeful play, cultural representation. We really want all children to see Black children positively represented in the toy aisle, and so that's what we're working on.
Love it, love it, love it. And then we'll go ahead to Miss Shalisa.
Well, hi, everybody. My name is Shalisa McNeil Burgess, and I'm the founder and CEO of Freya. And Freya is a lifestyle brand that creates cooling jewelry with cooling technology to overcome overheating, such as in hot flashes. The goal is to address that symptom, but also to talk about all of the freedoms that are associated with midlife and to help women have a better quality of life at this life stage.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And then we'll go ahead to Mr. Derek.
Derek, you're muted.
Thanks. What's going on, everybody? My name is Derek Parson, affectionately known as Teddy. I am the founder and CEO of Grassbeat, which was an educational training and engagement platform for the new workforce. But we recently pivoted to a platform that we're currently building called Latte, which is specifically for employees and entrepreneurs, giving them one-to-one guidance, feedback that they desperately need while on their professional and entrepreneurial journey.
Love it,
Glad
love
to
it.
be here.
Right? Love it. And each one of you will have a different business concept. So this is great because we're going to get into the weeds of how you all started your businesses, what have you all learned along the way, and how other entrepreneurs can thrive, in this environment, not only during COVID, but just as Black individuals. We know the barriers to entry are a little bit more difficult for us. We know that access to capital is a little bit less. So we're interested to hear all the goods you all have to offer. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with Miss Terry. Miss Terry, can you tell us what made you become an entrepreneur?
I was a terrible employee, you know. I wasn't about that life. And I think it was that I always had this thing where I was like, I have this great idea, or I know I could do this, or I could do this ego, I could do this better, that kind of thing, right? But it was the way that I came around about Brown Toy Box was really I was just kind of looking for my purpose, and I wanted to create a purpose-driven company, and just I was starting to. It was just all these things in my life started kind of coming together. I had turned 40. I was starting a new chapter in my life. Just got divorced, and I was like, I want to do something special. I want this next chapter to really mean something. And so that's how I really came about starting my business.
Nice. And Shalisha, how did you kick your business off?
I was hot. I was tired of being hot. I believe that millions of other women were tired of being hot. I didn't really know that much about this life stage. I turned 55 today. And so,
Happy birthday.
thank you. And so, as I was transitioning to what is known as midlife, there were a whole bunch of changes that were going on that I did not have previous knowledge of or resources to manage them. And everything I learned about it was negative. And I'm like, why is everything about midlife or menopause negative when I'm still fabulous? And I started talking to a lot of women, and they were not having the best quality of life. And all of the products that address the misery that I call hot flashes were like frumpy or not, had nothing whatsoever to do with the way I see myself. And I'm sure lots of other women. And so when I would ask them what you know about it, they were like, nothing. And I didn't go through it. And the truth is, it's such a negative stigma that you don't want to be associated with because it means you're an old lady that's all dried up. And I was like, no, we need to change that. And I wanted to create something beautiful that allowed us to be fashionable and beautiful and discreet and manage the misery. And so I woke up one day with the idea of cooling jewels, and that's where it took off from.
So that's an important concept. I definitely want to keep that, as we continue through the conversation, because you identified a problem and you addressed it, and then you were like, I'm going for it. So
Yeah.
love that, love that, love that. What about you, Derek? What made you become an entrepreneur?
It's in my blood. I'm from Brooklyn, born and raised. Um, it's it's that hustle, it's that grit that I think everybody from New York City just really has and pushes with. I've been starting companies since I was young, from you know snowstorms that happened when I was younger and get a shovel and make $10 digging people out, right? Went to college, started a moving business that was really just, me and my buddy trying to make a couple of dollars so we can pay tuition. That kind of scaled over 3 years, us moving uh, 4 to 6 different colleges worth of stuff down the I-90 in New York State, right? Back and forth to people's homes, but it's always been in my blood. My mom was an entrepreneur. She was selling church hats well across Brooklyn. So if you know anything about Caribbean mothers and how they love church, there's always a hat, right? So it's been in my blood. It's been in my family. It's just something I've been doing for quite some time. But the startup life is definitely different because it takes a little bit more oomph, I'll call it, in order to kind of scale. So it's a little bit more harder, a little bit more challenging. But this is the life we chose. So I've been doing it for a while.
That's important to note, Derek, because it sounds like you've been a hustler since you was young, like you said, and you said your mom was pretty much a hustler too. And it sounds like with a lot of the different entrepreneur journeys that you had, you didn't really need capital, right? And when we look at some of the basic facts of being a Black entrepreneur specifically, we know that Black entrepreneurs typically start with about $35,000 of capital versus our white counterparts to start with, over 100,000. And so how did you navigate that, and how have you navigated that through the multiple businesses that you've started, throughout your career?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think with exception of the tech startups that I'm currently building, everything has been self-funded, right? To kind of double down on that note, my mom didn't have the money to give me to put, towards a business, right? She was getting by selling her hats. She was a nurse as well too, but she was really struggling on her own to build her boutique, in Brooklyn.
Mhm.
And so I kind of watched that, right? So I realized that it's all about every dollar you bring in, you got to reinvest it back into the business, right? And so you have to understand that at an early age when you start whether it be a small scale business or whether it be a high growth tech startup, you want to make sure that you're reinvesting. So every dollar that I made, I put it to the side and put it back into the business until I actually learned what it took to grow a tech startup. And that's where investments and that kind of stuff came into play. And that's a whole nother ballgame.
Yeah, for sure. Shalisa, can you talk a little bit about how you overcome the Black tax? Especially, if you starting a business, later on in your career, how have you navigated that?
So I didn't start with $35,000. I started with zero. But I am, if you knew me, you would know that my nickname is Relentless. And if you ask Melissa Bradley, she'll tell you that too. So I didn't concern myself with what I didn't have. I just kept working with what I did have. And over the course of my career. So I'm a professional writer and I also teach business writing. I was teaching at NYU. And at the end of the day, what you do is you leverage relationships. And so when I first started, obviously it was a dream. So I didn't have any idea what to do, where to start. I had a good girlfriend who was initially my partner, and she had been in the jewelry business for 30 years. So I didn't know anything about jewelry or tech. I just knew that this was something that was going to be helpful and it was going to help address a problem. And I really believe that problems just need solutions. So I just started there. And I funded I self-funded too, like when the money needed to come from somewhere, it mostly came from me. But I did have some mentors who initially was like, hey, listen, you're not going to get this off the ground unless somebody give you some money. And then I got, some small seed funds from them. But in general, over the last 4 years, because I started this in 2016, it's been my own skin in the game. And I think that that's something that you have to be willing to commit to when you are a Black entrepreneur and you don't come from a background with money or country clubs or whatever. So again, just like in life, we learn to make a dollar out of 15 cents. That's what you have to do when you are a Black entrepreneur. So if you just sit around hoping that somebody's going to be your golden parachute, or all of a sudden they're going to come in and help, make sure you can eat and live indoors while you're trying to embark on this endeavor, you might as well go sit down and get a job, because that's not how it's going to work, or at least that's not how it's worked for most of the people I've been in contact with. So even today, when I finally launched, I'm like, I'm still looking for money. I'm like, okay, I need money for inventory now. But you don't worry about what you don't have. If you have a burning desire, and if you can prove that there is a real true market for what you want, you just got to keep pushing. And the more you push, so my favorite book, or one of my favorite books, is The Alchemist. And one of the things that it says in it is that the universe conspires to help you achieve your dreams. It will conspire to do so if you pursue it. So the minute you start pursuing it, nothing's going to happen. And I just believe that you have to believe in yourself enough to keep this moving.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Terry, I want to go ahead and let you touch on that topic as well, the Black tax, because, and for those that may not know what the Black tax is it's typically the burden that we carry as Black individuals of having to take care of our family, having to deal with systemic barriers, having to deal with a bunch of different hindrances that affect our ability to invest capital into our businesses. And so, Terry, like I said, I want to give you a chance to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Shalisha. I don't know which one started with $35,000, but it was me. It was not me. So I really funded my business first through my own savings, and I was consulting. I was doing all these all these other things. I'll be, what I tell people is, because startup life is made to look super glamorous, and it's not, right? So when I first started, I was working overnight at a hotel auditing, as a hotel auditor. That's not my expertise. I was an executive in PR in my past life, but I didn't want to take another career type job. So I wanted to do something that I didn't really care about, so I could really be spending my days working on my business. So I did that. I did pitch competitions. I did, all these different things. Like most people, I did not have a friends and family round, right? My friends and family were used to coming to me for money because I had been the person in the family who always had money. So there was that. I would say, I've heard people say, there's this thing going around where people say, never spend your own money, and I'm like,
not if you Black.
Right? Not at all. Not at all.
Right. People hear these things, they think that it applies to us too. It does not apply to us too, right? So people are like, how much skin do you have in the game, right? So I can say, I've spent this much of my own money. I've done this to get it to this level, And so I think, part of that is putting your own, using your own money, right? There's that. It's building the relationships. It's just, you have to be what we've always been, super scrappy, right? So pitch competitions. It's if I need to find it, I'm going to find it, right? Now, what I will say is, George Floyd changed the game.
Yep.
George Floyd changed the game. Everybody, all the companies were going online. We stand with Black. We stand with Black. We stand with Black. Then they started getting called out because they were standing with Black on LinkedIn, but they weren't doing anything else. So people like Melissa Bradley was like, okay, show us, right? And so pockets started opening up. So I was able to, there were certain things that happened. I was one of the Black founders that got money from Google, the Black Founders Fund, right? Google probably would not have done that had there not been social unrest over the summer. All these different things happen, and really George Floyd was the impetus for all of those things. So I'm very clear about that. I'm very clear that this white guilt money will not last much longer. And so get what you can while you can, and trying to kind of stop that away. But the Black tax is real. You have to go in, and you don't want to go in from a position of lack, but be clear that, particularly my product is specifically geared towards Black children. Now, it's for all children, Black children represent and all that, but it's really, I've always spelled B with a capital B with my product, right? Unapologetic about who my audience is. And so that limits the people who are looking at me as a good investment, right? And so I think you just have to be very clear about who you are, what your solution is, and how you're going to make money. Because I am a for-profit social enterprise. And so a lot of people are like, well, why don't you become a nonprofit? Because that's not the path for us.
Yeah.
We're talking about building generational wealth. We're talking about economic independence. And I can't preach that and there's no shade to nonprofits, but if that's the route I take, right? And so I'm like, no, because this is truly, I can't say, no, this is really a market that's been overlooked. It's a $27 billion market in the United States, toys. And so I want to lead that. I want to lead in that category. And so you've got to figure out, you just got to find a way. And that's going to be the message all the time. You just got to make a way.
It's interesting you all say that, because it was a study done by Pew Charitable Trust that said that most Black individuals said that they don't know someone in their family or in their friends who could give them $3,000 to start their business, but yet $35,000 in capital is one of the facts. So, but I completely agree with you, right? Because the past 5 years before joining 1863, I ran a nonprofit in DC, and people often be like, oh, we should run a nonprofit. This could be a nonprofit idea. It's like, no. There's so many social enterprises that are out there that we need to have to bring and build generational wealth into our community. So I completely agree with you all. I want to hear a little bit more about some of your successes, right? Now that we've kind of gotten through COVID a little bit, and I mean, COVID's not over, but a lot of Black businesses closed during COVID, right? One study said that about 41% of Black businesses closed in the first 3 months of COVID, compared to about 21% of white businesses. And so the three of you all are here because you all found a way to navigate that. You all found a way to thrive. And so let's talk a little bit about your successes and how you all did those things. And we can go ahead and jump back to you, Derek, to start that off.
Yeah, that's a great thing. Success during COVID speaks a lot, right? It speaks to your resiliency. It speaks to who you are as a leader in your company, right? For me and my team, early on, it was tough. It was definitely tough, right? Just like everybody else, COVID hit. Our sales pipeline started diminishing. Things that we thought we had in the bag were no longer there. We started furloughing people. And then it got a bit tougher for me personally, because then a couple of people in my family wound up with COVID. Some definitely passed. And so it was like, it just stopped everything for me, right? And so I was one of those founders who got hit, with like a ton of bricks. And so what we started to do, part of me was going to give up altogether. Part of me was like, you know what, the weight on my shoulders for all, with all of this was just too much. But then I just kept thinking about my mom, right? Her being a single mother, her coming from the islands, her just doing whatever she had to do just to raise me while being a nurse, while starting her hat business, while all of that stuff. And so I said, let me figure out and forge a way, right? Yep. And so what we did is we started doubling down on the people who were still around. We started asking a lot of questions, right? So we went back to the drawing board and doing a lot of customer discovery, right? We were selling into HR departments, right? And so from there, we realized just by talking, they were like, listen, COVID is hitting all of us. We're not bringing on new products to train anybody because we're firing people at record numbers, right? We're trying to figure out a way where the people who are staying, we can build morale, and the people who we have to furlough and let go, what can we do? Because we know we have to unfortunately get rid of them, but what can we do that it makes it easier for them? And so for us, we took a step back and said, listen, if our numbers are down, if we know the direct person we're selling into is saying they're not purchasing, let's take a step back. Let's look at who needs the most, right? And so what we found was that the employees were actually saying, hey, we need this help, right? We need more guidance. We need people to talk to reach out to. And then we went back to those same employers and said, would you pay for a product that actually allows you to reach out to those who are still working and those who you have furloughed in order to either connect them, build guidance, build feedback, give them exactly what they need so they can transition to wherever that is? And they were like, right now, absolutely. Like, we need something desperately. And then we started doubling down on that, figuring out what that looks like, right? Figuring out what that scheme, the pricing model, the business model, whether it should be an app versus a website, all of that stuff. And as we started at least the last 4 months of 2020, we just went gun ho and said, you know what, we're embracing this pivot. And then walking into 2021, we have 3 Fortune 500 companies knocking at our door saying, hey, we heard you're building this. We want in now, right? And so, I started tearing up towards the end of the year. Like, I thought it was all over, but it goes back to that resiliency. It goes back to not being defeated internally and then really listening to the people who you are trying to sell to. And if we didn't do that, we wouldn't be at a place where we're at today, where we're trying to close on these Fortune 500 companies, where we're bringing on hundreds of people to test a product to just really validate it, to make sure this is the market, this is where it needs to go. And ultimately, the numbers that we stand to make towards the mid of this year, they will blow the numbers that we made out of the water for the past 2 years. So again, grit, resiliency, that's what did it for us.
Love it, love it, love it. And what about you, Shalisa?
Well, so fortunately for me, I was in product development for so long. We had initially planned to have our soft launch in time for Mother's Day 2020, and COVID hit. And so then it's like, wow, now we have to push this back. And for some, I guess it would have been like a detriment, but for us, it ended up being a blessing because that meant we had more time to pour into getting it just right. We pivoted to an online e-commerce platform, which means it's saving us a lot more money. And we just literally launched like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. That means we really weren't ready this time last year. So sometimes you think of something and you think it's gonna be a disaster, like Derek said, right? And then it ends up being something beyond what you could have imagined it was going to be, because now you have to think differently. And I think that that's really the key part of having to go through any downturn. Like, COVID hit everybody super hard. That doesn't mean it's the first time entrepreneurs have had to go through something that has been like incredibly detrimental to them, or it could have been a make or break situation, right? Because we used to make a break. Like, if you was from the hood, make a break was like rent, food. Like, so I think that we to me have perfected the art of the pivot, because it's like, if I can't go left, I'm gonna go right, left, 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 right, because I'm going to get to that end goal. And I think that's how I have approached this particular tragedy, because it's a tragedy. Anytime 500,000 people die from something, you can't be, even if it doesn't happen to you directly, you can't not feel for that. And then you're thinking, wow, here I am coming out with a product and people are dying. But that, at the end of the day, there's still people who need what you have to offer. So you just now need to figure out a way to be humble and respectful in the fact that what you're presenting or what you're offering has value no matter what. So I think now today's products can't just be nice to have. They actually have to be necessary, because if they're not necessary, they may not have longevity. So like what I'm doing, I'm not just focusing on a product, I'm focusing on an entire platform. So I'm addressing mind, body, soul, spirit at the end of the day. It has to be necessary. And if your product that you have is necessary, then even in a pandemic, or even in some kind of economic downturn, or even with some kind of personal situation, you will learn the art of the pivot, and then that will sustain you. And so it wasn't about money, because obviously I didn't launch. It doesn't mean I wasn't still spending my money, because I still had to do things, but it allowed me some time to take a step back and be like, okay, how can we do this better? And that's what I use this time for.
Wow. What about you, Terry? What are some of the successes that you've had?
Yeah, so I think like Derek, when COVID first hit, we were right in the middle um, signing contracts with schools. So our
Yeah.
business is B2B with schools, sometimes partners funding schools or schools buy directly, and the other one is direct to consumer, right? And so we were right in the middle of signing all these contracts with schools. But then when COVID hit, of course, all those resources went to technology. And here we are talking about a tactile STEAM kit, right? Where, I'm like, oh, we want kids to get on the floor and really play and get offline. It's too much screen time.
Yeah.
And then everything goes directly to screen time. So we had an oh
Mhm.
shit moment, right? But we were like, well, we're going to let the data lead, because what we knew for sure was that the schools that we were doing our that we were serving were Title I schools, where most of the parents were essential employees. Those kids were not getting online, right? They had limited access to Wi-Fi, and they had they're sharing a hotspot with their big brother or sister or whomever else,
Yep.
and they just couldn't do it. So we're like, they're gonna come back, right? And sure enough, they did. So right around in between, we got some Band-Aid funding. We got a drop of PPP. We've got, some other little small Band-Aid funding. So we were already running lean. We ran anemic, right? After that. But then when we started kind of chugging back up, and we started getting more school business. And we were like, you know what? The whole, I think a lot of people were focused on, there were so many damn webinars that were happening. I think that some of those webinars ran folks out of business. They're like, pivot, pivot, pivot. So there were people who were doing jewelry, and then they were selling masks or PPP. I'm like, okay. And so for us, we had an evolution, right? So we evolved from this STEAM kit to a full small batch toy company. And in that evolution, we were still doing pitch competitions, we were still doing all these different things. And so we just recently landed a full scale, full chain deal with Target. So our toys will be in Targets everywhere nationwide, because we were really focused on who our customer was, how we could serve them, and we always led with data. And so I think that is one thing that I would always say is, it can't be, I know Black people because I'm Black, right?
Yep.
It can't be, I know women because I'm a woman. It's got to be,
Right.
that might be what makes you start this, because I'm a Black mom and I wanted my kids to see themselves positively represented, and I wanted them to have access to STEAM education and careers and become STEAM leaders of the future. That might have been how it started, but I need to have data to back that up. And so we were really successful about collecting that data. And I think that's really how we were able to sustain ourselves and grow and then sell into Target.
Nice, nice, nice. Yeah, I love the all the topics of resiliency that is coming through. And when we think about what it means to be a Black entrepreneur, how to become a successful entrepreneur, you have to be resilient. You have to make pivots, but you also have to lead with your intelligence. We know that it's double as hard for us to get in the door, double as hard for us to get a sale, double as hard for us to be successful. One of the things that I'm interested to know, right, because we often talk about institutional and systemic racism, and we know that a lot of these systems, have led to the demise of Black businesses during COVID. Did any of you all get PPP funding, first round or second round?
At first,
One, two,
but I
and
got
how did you?
like
Yeah.
a little bit.
A
Me
little
too.
Yeah,
bit.
I didn't have revenue, so
A
I didn't get
smidge.
anything. Yeah.
Right, a smidge. Yes, Derek, a smidge.
Hmm.
And that's what, and see, when we talk about systemic racism and institutional racism, that is one of the prime examples. When we look at the first round of PPP funding that came out, 95% of Black businesses did not get that
Get
round of
anything.
money.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, right now we're seeing Biden's administration starting to make some of those changes, like initially, and I was fortunate. So as I mentioned, I was running a nonprofit the past 4 years. So when COVID hit, I already had a great relationship with my business banker, right? And we know that about only 33% of Black entrepreneurs have good relationships with business bankers or have a business banker, right? Because most of the times, the banks that we're working with, you need a certain level of threshold to actually have a business banker. And so that's one of the things that we aren't taught. That's one of the barriers that, affect our ability to do business. But again, through this conversation, we've heard a lot of key things that have often, been key players for the few of us, I would say, to be successful. Go ahead, Terry.
And I just want to say, I can tell you unequivocally that I would not have gotten that, even that smidge of PPP, without my relationship with my banker. I know for a fact that, I was blowing him up. Like, is it my turn? What are you guys doing? Where's my application? What's this? What's it? I know for a fact I would not even have gotten that little bit of money without that relationship with my bank.
Me too.
Yeah, and I agree. Yeah, I do. I agree on that one. I'll even take that a step further. Because we're software, right? It's not a tangible asset, right? So most banks won't invest in like a tech company unless you have some type of physical asset that they can snatch away should it bottom up, right? Belly up. And so being able to get that smidge of PPP, it was almost like we lucked out to be able to do that, right? And so I was kind of excited, but again, it's a smidge. it helped, but you got to call it what it is, right? It could have been a lot. I know a lot of other people who weren't even able to capitalize on it, who applied and got denied. So yeah, I'm thankful. I'm definitely thankful.
So we've heard a lot of great tips from the three of you throughout the course of this panel. What are some additional things that some additional advice you would give a young up-and-coming entrepreneur that may want to start a business, or new entrepreneurs that are trying to figure it out still? We'll go ahead and start with you, Terry, and then we'll continue on.
So much. So I would say, one of the big things I would say is use discernment about who you let speak into your business, right? Everybody's got advice, everybody's got tips, everybody's got, you have to be very careful and be able to receive information, take it in, but filter out what really works for you and for your business. And that's not to say go into it thinking I know everything, right? And nobody can't tell me anything. It's not that at all. But if I had listened to people who were credible experts, I would have had one box doing the exact same thing and just going out finding new customers each time because they didn't understand the business, right?
Right.
And so you just have to be super careful, be very clear about your why, be very clear about who your customer is, do the work, use data, and then be careful about who you let speak into your business, but also make sure you put people around you that are where you have gaps in knowledge that have expertise.
Absolutely. Shalisa?
Well, I'll just piggyback a little bit on what Terry said, because the one thing I noticed when you're a new entrepreneur and there's a lot that you don't know, as you're seeking information, you're trying to seek advice from people that you think know more than you.
Yep.
And if they believe that you have something that has some level of viability, they often want to change your vision to theirs. And that is often detrimental, because if you're so zealous and you're not sure what you're doing or how to do it, it can be a distraction, it can be a discouragement. But first, I would say gain the knowledge that you need about what it is that you endeavor to do. Don't go in there like cold. Like, even if I say to you, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was going to pursue it. In that pursuit, I was fact finding every single day. I was talking to everybody, and it wasn't really more so about the product, because I didn't know what the product was going to be, but I needed to understand how to build the foundation of a business, right? Because the business case is like, products are great. The one thing I think is detrimental to Black people and Black business is often we know how to do whatever it is that we're doing, or how to sell whatever it is that we're selling, but it's the business case behind it that tends to be our demise. So in that pursuit of trying to do what it is you're trying to do, make sure the people that you're talking to are not trying to change your vision. More importantly, get that knowledge that you need. That's really important. And a key thing for me is, like, if you are the kind of person that hurts your feelings, don't do this. If you are the kind of person that is easily discouraged, don't do this. If you are not willing to put your own skin in the game, don't do this, because this is not for the faint of heart. Like I tell people, this is harder than childbirth and raising teenagers. Had I known 4 years ago how difficult this is going to be, I might have questioned myself and my own sanity. You have to have like a passionate, burning desire, and it has to be for something that is actually truly viable. And I've learned a lot over these years, and I'm grateful for all the people who poured into me with just the knowledge and not the desire to change the vision. And I'm actually grateful for those who did, because now I have discernment that I didn't have before. But you really, really, really have to know what you're trying to do, and then not be afraid to pivot. If you can't keep going straight, you're gonna have to, make a left, make a right, but you have to not be so stuck on this is the only way I think it's going to work, because in your business, you're always going to have to be able to plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D. You're going to have to do that. And like I said, if you give up quick, then every time something is hard, you'll give up quick. So don't do this.
Absolutely. Derek?
Yeah, I agree with both. I think the thing I would probably lean to is community, right? And I say that because I'm fortunate enough to be part of Google for Startups Black Founder Exchange, and so I've been involved with that for the past 2 years, right? I'm fortunate enough to be a former cohort member of 1863 Pipeline Accelerators, right? With my other panelists, right? And so as well as Founder Jim and some other accelerators as well too. I think the thing that new entrepreneurs need to understand is that when you first start out, it may seem like you're alone in this vision and it's on this journey, but you have to quickly get aligned with people who are doing something similar, right? And not necessarily the product or the avenue, because at 1863, I was in a room with CPG, CPG, all right? Like there was so many, there was people selling in, like Terry into Target, right? And I'm sitting there like, oh, I mean, how does that help me? But what you learn is the problems, the issues, the nuances that they're having as well, right? They can,
Exactly.
when you start talking to them, and it could be about products, the stock on shelves, but they're going to talk to you about something in your own business that's going to be like, oh, okay, I see now. So community for any new and upcoming entrepreneur is huge, and especially for the Black community, especially because the resources that are out there for us are slim to none. Yeah, we got Google, but you can read a bunch of Google articles and still not know anything, right? You know, a little by a little, but then when you have that community that can reinforce it, right? If you, I at times I come up and I call people like, hey, some of my Google for Startups cohort members, some of my 1863 cohort members, and I say, listen, I got a problem right here. Can we do a 15-minute brainstorming session? And I walk away from that like, got it, right? That is essential. It's essential because once you form that community, ultimately what you don't realize you're doing, you're boosting the ecosystem as well too in your immediate area, right? And I'll say this, I'm from Brooklyn, New York, but I'm building my startup 6 hours away in Buffalo, New York. And so I could be a small fish in the ocean in New York City, but I chose to try to be a whale, I'll use that. I'm a big guy anyways, but a whale, up in a small spot like Buffalo, New York. And what that does now is it puts the light on me, right? I'm that Black founder up there trying to build something in an ecosystem where there's not that many of us doing it. That gives me visibility. That allow, Melissa to say, who's this Black guy up here just, trying to chuck it out and he's not getting the help he needed. Let's get this guy down here in DC, right? Like, oh, who's this Black guy doing that up here? Let's get him down in North Carolina, Durham, for Google. That kind of stuff, that community starts building. And so as I start to grow, as I start to learn, now other new entrepreneurs are coming to me, whether it be in Buffalo, whether it be back in Brooklyn, whether it be anywhere in the US, and they're saying, hey, I need help. And so that community now helps, right? Now we're starting to build in totally different ways. So that's my biggest tip. Find somebody, right? Definitely get in that group, right? And really build that community, because that's going to take you far, and for your mental too. Trust me, it'll take you far.
Absolutely. I want to give the audience some time to go ahead and drop some questions in the chat, but to pick up where you just left off, Derek, it's important also for us when thinking about community, and we often don't understand why, people often say buy Black, but it's when we think about our history in the history of the United States, Black people have really only been free for about 20 to 30 years. When we look at when the Emancipation Proclamation was, then we look at where, segregation in it, then we look at where the effects of the war on drugs through the 80s and 90s. Really, we only been free about 20 years in this country. And that's why, we have so much less wealth. That's why we have so much less access to capital. And so it's important when we frequent these spaces of entrepreneurship and venture capital that we work more together, right? We've been conditioned to be threatened by one another in the same room, and that shouldn't be the case. The more we can begin to lock arms, to have conversations about our pain points, and to know that we can win collectively, that there is enough out there for all of us to win, then we'll be in a better position to thrive as a people and to thrive as a culture, right? A lot of white people work together. We haven't been conditioned to work together, and that's something that we have to begin to do. That's something that we have to begin to change the narrative on. And so I'm so glad you just talked about community. We don't have any questions in the chat yet, so I want to go ahead and ask you all. One of the biggest challenges that I've learned about and read about in relation to entrepreneurs, Black entrepreneurs thriving, is the mindset that we need to ideate and to conform to exactly what Shalisa said about what people tell us to do. And so we begin to belittle our products, we begin to lower our price points and things of that nature. How are some of the ways you all have decided not to ideate, but still pivot and not devalue your business? And I'll go ahead and kick it to you, Terry, and we'll kick it back around.
I just don't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't do it. I think I'm very clear, like again, data driven, right? So I know what the market should pay. I know the price point. I know the community, So it's when you're, I'm verbal all day. So I'm all about being overly analytical, right? And so when you have all of that data to inform your decision-making process, like you use your gut, trust your gut, but then, trust but verify. Trust your gut, but then verify that you're on the right path. So
Yep.
I don't do it. Like when people start speaking like, oh, well, you know what, you should just do, that's what you should. You're speaking out of your fear. You're not about to put that energy on me. So I just am able to I just have an energy wall around me, and I just I don't allow that around me.
Shalisa?
I agree. Like you just have to be very specific and focused and knowledgeable about what it is you're trying to do. And it's nothing wrong with having people pour into you. Just don't let them pour their vision and their ideas, and so that it dilutes yours. I think that's really key. And the data is important. Understanding your market is like the one thing that we've learned, and I've been in a bunch of accelerators and incubators, and I was in 1863. And if you haven't done the work in terms of knowing your product, knowing your market, knowing your audience, knowing there's like so many specific nuances that you need to know. And there's always the idea of testing, but what I think that we do as entrepreneurs also then, or as Black people who have businesses, that we don't know the business case behind what it is we're offering. So we're like, I think it's worth XYZ. And then you wonder why people not buying it. Well, they're not buying it because that's not what the market bears.
Yep, and the research.
That's what you think that is worth. Yep. But you haven't done the work to figure out what people will pay for. And so that's really what the key aspect is. It's like that knowledge. So if you don't do anything else, it's like gaining knowledge and not letting your lack of knowledge or maybe experience and wisdom be diluted by you. that people who you think know more, because then they often dilute what you're trying to do and your ideas.
Yep. And Derek, we actually have a question for you. Someone said, if you have an application idea, where would be the best place in Buffalo to get started?
Yeah, first thing I say, come talk to me. I just right, like I said, it's all about community, right? I'm definitely here to help people. But there are several organizations up top that are now committing themselves to helping minority entrepreneurs, right? So one of my first investors at my seed stage, excuse me, my pre-seed stage, was an organization called Launch New York. I was literally one of their first minority entrepreneurs that they invested in, right? And they do things more of an incubator type feel. So if you have an idea for an application, you have some stuff vetted out, you'll be able to go to them, and they'll pair what they call an EIR, which is an entrepreneur in residence, right?
Mhm.
That entrepreneur in residence will, and this is not just relegated to Buffalo either. They do this in city to city across the nation,
Yep.
right? If you find these organizations that actually have entrepreneur in residence incubators, they'll be able to assist you in developing your idea and working that to from step to step to a point where you can now try to validate it. You can develop prototypes and up to an MVP, and then see whether or not it's something that can be in the market. But yeah,
And then
up
also,
top in up top in Buffalo, I mean, come to me. I'm ready to give all the tea to where to go and who not to talk to and everything in between. For real.
yep. And then there's also entrepreneur in residences at, your local university. I'm an entrepreneur in residence at Georgetown Business School. So if you go to the business school at your local university, 9 times out of 10, during our current climate, most business schools have entrepreneurship programs, entrepreneurship curriculums like this one here at Howard that have EIRs that will help you. And again, one of the things that we typically don't tap into as Black entrepreneurs is, free mentorship. And so that's
Absolutely.
definitely something that we definitely need to begin to do more of as Black entrepreneurs. Another question we have from the audience, and I'll add this as a two-part, is how do you establish a relationship with your customers? And once you do establish a solid customer base, do you double down into that niche or should you try to expand? And I'll go ahead and drop it to you, Terry, especially with your partnership with Target.
Yeah, so remember, I have two customers, right? So I have schools, and then I also have mom, dads, families, direct to consumer. So it was really kind of like what Jared was talking about building community, right? Building
Mhm.
advocacy for your brand and for your products. And with you talking specifically about Target, it was, I did that. I mean, really, it was through 1863 Ventures and pitch competition, right? So I did the new voice. I need to do the. I'm sorry. I did the new voices pitch competition, and then I just started, at the same time stalking people at Target, and so because Virgo, and so so I started doing that, and it just evolved there. But it's always about really knowing and respecting your customer and having them become advocates for you and for your brand. So with the schools, establishing relationships, it's join different associations, have key memberships, write thought leadership pieces in the channel that you're working on. So I'm talking about representation in STEAM. I'm talking about representation in toys. People reach out to me like, hey, can you talk about representation in toys? Those kind of things. Build your credibility, build your reputation in the spaces that you want to go deep in. And I think that's how you really start building that kind of respect. But then also, again, have the data with you, right? So these are how many customers I've acquired. This is how I've kept them. This is how we can grow this. Help them to see the bigger vision of having you as one of their partners. How does that benefit them? It can't be because you're Black, right? It's got to be
Absolutely.
some money. That's what it's got to be.
And we have one more question, and then I'm going to introduce Dean Lawson Borders of the program. The question is, are you working full-time on your businesses? And if so, at what point did you let go of your full-time job? And I'll throw that one to you, Shalisha, with, you beginning your business not too long ago.
No, actually, I started my business in 2016. I just launched the product recently, and I worked the job until 2018. And then what I realized is that you honestly, to me, and it's not a luxury that we have, but if energy flows where your attention goes, and it was very difficult to divide your attention. So I might still teach a class, right? Because that's not quite as taxing as my full-time job as like a grant writer was, right? Because that requires a lot of thought and a lot of time. And so once I realized that, like you, Terry, I'm not really a great employee. I don't really like people enough for that nonsense. I'm not really good with office politics, and I don't want to go to another meeting to talk about the meeting. But once I realized that in order for this to move forward, I was going to have to be at the helm full time with all of my energy all in, I just had to make that sacrifice. Fortunately, I have a significant other, so we eat and live indoors, but that's all we do.
Yeah.
That's, at this stage, it is because all of my resources and all of my savings, because I'm just getting out there. So maybe this is really helpful to somebody who's really trying, means that I'm at that crucial stage, right? Like, we finally got some sales in, but it's not quite robust yet because we still haven't rolled out a full marketing plan. Like, and even though we've been building community over the years, just because you're building community over the years doesn't mean that once the product comes out, everybody's going to go and like buy immediately.
Yep, exactly.
We get inquiries and everything, lots of questions, and I'm an emerging brand. So I don't have that track record. Now I have to build the credibility through the product and the market. That means now I have to go out and meet people and demonstrate it and all of that. So all of that's going to take time, and it requires your full-time attention. So yeah, I had a job until 2018, and then I went full-time. And I can't tell you what the right point is in anybody else's journey to when you can go through this full-time, but hey, just figure out how you're going to eat and live indoors, and then decide if you can eat ramen noodles enough and get by until you get your big break.
Absolutely. And one more good question just popped in. So I want to give us a couple more minutes to talk about this one. Have you, and I'll let you all choose who does it. We'll just do one person. Have you experienced imposter syndrome, and how have you dealt with it? Who wants that one?
Explain imposter syndrome, please.
That's a good component. Derek, go ahead.
Yeah. So imposter syndrome is when you it's when you feel you don't belong, right? Like
Yeah.
it's one of those things where you walk into the room and you start questioning why you're there, right? And so have I felt that? Absolutely. When did I feel it? I give a quick example. So I'm sitting at a table. It's a round table with other founders in the area, and they're all talking about the highs and lows of raising money, right? Hey, we need to just, if we can get this, we'll be able to do X, Y, Z. And I'm just like, yeah, I get it. And so they go around the table and said, hey, I just asked such and such and such for $1 million. And they gave it to me. And then the next guy says that, well, yeah, I just asked my whoever for 500K, and he's cutting the check a little later today. And so they're all going around the table. So you can imagine they're my counterparts, right? They're not Black. And so I'm sitting there, and now I'm feeling, and I'm a big guy, right? So my presence is felt when I walk into the room. But now I'm kind of slumping in the chair, like, oh, they're really going around. Like, they're going from person to person. And so at that moment, I didn't feel like I belonged there. I didn't feel as if I was the right person to be at that table, because of the fact that I don't have a network to just call and ask for $1 million or $500,000 or $5,000 or 500, right? Like, I don't have that, right? I have the network that's like, yo, we're rooting for you. Take this rooting for you and let it cheer you on. right? And that's what I have. And so you damn sure I take that rooting for you and I use it to fuel me, right? But at that moment, it's one of those situations where that's where resiliency comes in. That's where perseverance comes in. That's where grit comes in. That's where you're going to have to tell yourself that you're meant to be in this room. That's where I had to tell myself, well, I'm meant to be at this table. And when it came around to me, I said, oh, y'all all lucky. Y'all got people that can give out money like that. You see my people? No, we don't got it, right? So I'm working hard. So when I do have someone to give that money, it'll be for a specific reason. And they all shut up, right? They were like, oh, okay. But you have to claim it. You have to own it. Because imposter syndrome is one of those things. It'll eat away at you. And then you'll feel as if you don't belong. And that's not the case, right? We've been made to feel like we don't belong here in this country, here in our own skin. We've been made to feel like that so long. But the truth of the matter is, and the stats and statistics are out there, we have helped to build this country. Our ideas,
Absolutely.
our principles, our ideologies, everything we've done has helped to build this. So if you have an idea that you think you can get off the ground, that you think people want, that you know people need, put it out there. Don't ever feel like you're less than, because I guarantee you, yeah, just don't ever feel like you're less than. Please don't. But that's my answer, man.
Yeah, can I just say this
Appreciate
one
that.
quick thing? One quick
Okay,
thing.
go for it.
This is really for Black women, right? Where the world tells you to contract, expand, take up all your space. We'll walk in a room sometimes and we try to make I'm a big girl too. We walk in a room and we try and make ourselves really small and not be noticed. Spread out, because you're contracting so other people can have room, right? That's where that imposter syndrome comes in. Spread out, physically spread out. Take up all your space. Use your voice, use your full, loud Black woman voice, because you have every right to be there. You have every right to speak up. You have every right to speak about your business. You're there because you have something that other people don't have. Now, this is for men and women. You are there because you have something that other people don't have, and they want to hear from you. They want to hear what your secret sauce is. They want to hear about what you bring to the table. So bring it to the table. Put it out there, right?
Be unapologetically Black. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to now give Dean Lawson Borders an opportunity to speak and introduce herself and speak a little bit about the program. Dean Lawson Borders, thank you for having us. The stage is yours. You're muted. Perfect. Oh, we can't hear you yet. Nope. We can't hear you. I think so. I don't know what's wrong. Let's see.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay, all right, so something's going on. You know, there's never a dull moment, but good afternoon, good evening. I want to just tell all you how much I've just enjoyed what I've heard. You've been so on point. What Derek and Terry just said at the last question is absolutely on point, 10 points plus for that, because it's so important for the young entrepreneurs on here to understand that I don't believe in anything called imposter syndrome. You are who you are, and you are here for a purpose, and you are here to deliver. You do not let anyone take you out of the game. You know, only you can set you aside. You don't let anybody else do that. Entrepreneurship to me is about what's inside of you, that you believe in it enough to reach down as deep as you have to go, and you do everything to see it go there. So I can't appreciate you guys enough, 1863, and everyone for making these workshops available, because it is the unknown in so many ways. And what we want to do with this program here with Melissa Bradley at Howard in the School of Communications on how you innovate and looking at entrepreneurship is to share these best practices, lessons learned. Yes, there will be moments where things may not be as you wish, but it's the perseverance that makes the difference. And I think that's what's made the difference for all of you and what leads you to go on. So you have just shared the excellent points we want to share. with particularly the young students who are starting out and trying to find their way. They had excellent questions about when do you go full time with it, all of those things that you guys have been through. So I just can't say no more than thank you, thank you, thank you. And we hope this conversation continues and that some of them reach out to you, because I think what you shared about networking, they do have to understand, build that community, create that support system. So with that, I will turn it over for you to wrap up, but many thanks, and I know much appreciated.
Thank you so much, Dean Lawson Borders. And one of the things I'll say, Melissa told me when I first started entrepreneurship, about 6 years ago, she said, be who you are, or they'll never accept you for who you want to be. And, I took that, I ran with it. The past 5 years, I've had a red mohawk. I've been able to raise over $6 million for my nonprofit and my consulting firm. So, I am a part of the truth that knows that. And I thank you all. I want to give everyone an opportunity to, say how people can get in contact with you. You can either say your email address, say your Instagram, your Twitter. I'll go around in a circle again, and you can also drop it in the chat. We'll start with you, Terry.
Yeah, I'm teaching children STEM because I'm not good at it. So I can't drop it in the chat, but find me on LinkedIn at Terry Michelle Bradley. And I will be happy to connect with you. LinkedIn is the untapped resource that so many Black folks do not use. Y'all do not try and build your whole relationship on Instagram and Facebook. You need to be on LinkedIn, and you need to have a strong profile on LinkedIn. So find me there, and I'm happy to connect with any of you.
Absolutely. Derek?
Yeah, same thing. You can find me on LinkedIn, Derek Parson, as my name is spelled out there. Also, if we're the platform we're building, right, is one-to-one mentorship, right? So if you know for a fact that you are going to need mentorship, I would love you to jump on. We're about to go into alpha testing right now. We would love to have a lot of the students from Howard University, entrepreneurs, professionals, whomever, to jump on this platform. Visit Grab a Latte, so GRABLATT. So grabalatte.io, right? And sign up. We'd love to get you connected to mentors across the nation who are specifically looking to help minority women and underrepresented founders with their journey with entrepreneurship and their professional careers. All right, so definitely.
And Shalisa?
Hey, sorry for my technical difficulty. I can be reached obviously on LinkedIn also. It's Shalisa McNeil or Shalisa McNeil Burgess. I think you can find me under both. Also Shalisa, which is SHEILISA at myfreya.com, because our website is myfreya.com. I'm more than willing to share my journey or to talk to people all the time. I think the best way to give back is to not hoard the information that you have, but also to be a willing participant to whom much is given, much is expected. And so if you reach out to me and you have some questions, or if I have anything I can share with you and point you in the right direction. I learned from another entrepreneur, Tara Darnley from Darling & Co. When I met her, she said, I don't compete, I collaborate. So that is the mindset. Collaboration, I think, is really going to be what's beneficial for all of us to achieve the success we're looking for.
Awesome. And you all can just ping me at daniel@1863.net, or you can find me online at dannywright.tv on Instagram and Twitter. Thank you all so much for joining our panel today. Again, this is the Howard School of Communications, John Johnson, Chair of Entrepreneurship Series. Thank you all again, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody.